The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of a pen against overdue bills. The tiny apartment seemed to shrink around her, its peeling wallpaper and dim light pressing down on her shoulders. Maya, a 32-year-old single mom, leaned back in her chair, exhaustion carved into her face after another 12-hour shift at the diner. Her son Eli slept in the next room, his school backpack resting by the door, worn. With the broken zipper she hadn't yet found the money to fix. Her eyes burned from staring at the laptop screen, chasing impossible dreams on classifieds and foreclosure listings. She wasn't even sure why she looked. Habit, maybe. Most nights it was just torture, scrolling through homes she could never afford. Until something strange stopped her cold, a headline. Abandoned property, 600, former bowling alley, must sell. She blinked, certain she was hallucinating. $600? That wasn't even 2 weeks' rent for this apartment. Her finger hovered over the listing, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. This has to be a scam, she whispered to herself. The photo attached was grainy, probably from the late 90s. A squat brick building with half the neon letters missing from its sign. Strike and Save Bowling. The S and the V dangled crooked like broken teeth. But there was something about it, a place that once held laughter and Friday night league games, now abandoned, waiting. Maya rubbed her eyes, pulled the blanket tighter. She almost clicked away. Then Eli stirred in the next room, mumbling in his sleep. She thought of how he asked last week if they could buy him new sneakers. His old ones pinched his growing feet. She hadn't had the heart to say no, but she'd hesitated too long, and the moment had passed. Her heart twisted. She leaned closer to the screen, reading the fine print. Sold as is. Buyer assumes responsibility. Immediate transfer upon payment. Property located 4th Street, Millhaven. Millhaven. She knew that town. A forgotten stretch of Rust Belt America where factories closed and families moved away. Maya laughed again, but this time it wasn't amused. It was hollow. An entire bowling alley. For less than a used car. On the table beside her sat the stack of bills she couldn't pay. She picked one up, electricity, overdue, final notice stamped in red. She let it fall, the corner brushing against something else tucked between envelopes. A torn-out classified clipping she had scribbled on earlier in the week. She picked it up. The ink was smudged, but the words were legible. Abandoned bowling alley. $600. And beneath it, faint but clear, was the same faded photograph of the crumbling building. Maya held the scrap in her hands, staring at the washed-out bricks, the cracked parking lot. The edges were curled, worn by her fingers. She hadn't realized she'd already ripped it out, already kept it, like her heart had known before her head dared to. What if? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her chest tightened, a war waging in her mind. Logic screamed that this was ridiculous. $600 wasn't pocket change. She would have to drain her tiny savings, the emergency fund she guarded like life itself. It was supposed to be for Eli if he ever got sick, if the car finally broke down, if life pushed her harder than it already did. But another voice whispered louder. What if it changes everything? She grabbed her phone. The number on the ad was barely legible, faded by time. Her hands shook as she dialed. One ring, 2, 3. She almost hung up when a gravelly voice answered. Millhaven County Clerk's office. Yes, hi, Maya stammered. I'm calling about a property listed. The bowling alley? A pause. She thought she heard the man chuckle softly. Still up, huh? Thought nobody would ever take that off our hands. Her pulse raced. So it's real? The price, I mean. 600, yes, ma'am? Cash or cashier's check. Property's been abandoned nearly 40 years. Liability for the county. First buyer who signs gets the deed. She swallowed hard, her mouth dry. And after I pay, it's mine? Another pause. Papers shuffled on the other end. Yours. Lock, stock, and broken lanes. You want it? Her heart hammered in her chest. She could almost hear her own breath echoing. Eli's soft snore drifted from the bedroom. The future balanced on the edge of a whisper. Maya tightened her grip on the phone, staring down at the crumpled clipping in her other hand. Yes, she said, voice trembling. I want it. There was no going back. The sun rose weakly through the blinds, painting the cramped apartment in tired shades of grey. Maya pulled on her diner uniform, the fabric stiff from too many washes. She caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed in a thin line. There was no time for makeup. No time for anything, really. "Mom." Eli's small voice drifted from the bedroom. She forced a smile, stepping inside. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, legs dangling, shoes too tight for his growing feet. "Morning, baby," she said, kneeling to tie the frayed laces. "Ready for school?" He shrugged. "They laughed at me yesterday. Said my shoes looked like clown shoes." His voice cracked, her heart twisted. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "Don't listen to them. You're stronger than they know." The truth stung. Kids could be cruel, and poverty made easy targets. She tucked his homework folder into the battered backpack, zipping it closed, with the care of someone protecting treasure. At the diner, the hours stretched thin. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the griddle, the smell of burnt coffee, all of it blurred as Maya worked double shifts. Customers laughed with friends, while she forced smiles and balanced trays heavy enough to buckle her wrist. Every dollar tipped mattered. Every coin tucked into her apron felt like survival. That night, exhaustion weighed her down as she opened the refrigerator, nearly empty except for milk and a half-eaten pack of bologna. She sighed, scribbling eggs, bread, apples on a notepad she knew she couldn't afford to fill. On the fridge, papers hung crooked. Eli's school art, a crayon drawing of a house with a sun smiling above it, taped right next to a stack of bills. One in particular glared at her, electricity, final notice. Red ink stamped like a warning shot across the page. She pressed her palm against it, imagining what would happen if the lights went out. Eli appeared at her side, holding a paper airplane. "This one goes farther," he said, tossing it. The flimsy plane glided and fell short, landing beneath the fridge. He bent down to retrieve it and pulled out an envelope that had slipped into the shadows. "Mom, this has your name on it." Maya frowned, taking it. The envelope was thick, official, with the county clerk's seal pressed into the corner. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a crisp sheet of paper, stamped in blue ink, deed of sale, transfer of ownership, property, Strike and Save Bowling, 4th Street, Millhaven. Buyer, Maya Albright. Price, $600. Date of transfer, March 12th. She stared at it, hardly breathing. The paper was heavy, smelling faintly of ink and government filing cabinets. Her name, printed in bold letters across the deed. "Mom?" Eli asked, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" She couldn't answer at first. She just sat down at the table. The document spread before her, like a relic unearthed from another life. Her pulse quickened. Her exhaustion didn't vanish, but beneath it rose something she hadn't felt in years. A spark. She looked at Eli, eyes wide. "It's ours," she whispered. "We own a bowling alley." Eli blinked, confused and amazed. "A real one, like with lanes and balls?" Her laugh shook, somewhere between disbelief and wonder. "Yes, a real one." She pressed her hand against the deed, her fingers tracing the seal as though it might vanish if she let go. The bills still hung on the fridge. The apartment was still suffocating. But on this night, a different future flickered in front of her. The bowling alley wasn't just a building. It was a chance, a battered, broken echo of a past era. And now it was hers. The road into Millhaven stretched long and empty, lined with factories whose windows had been shattered years ago, weeds curling through cracked pavement. Maya's car rattled over potholes. Eli pressed against the window with wide eyes. When she turned the corner onto 4th Street, her breath caught. There it was. Strike and Save Bowling. The building loomed like a tombstone from another era, brick walls weather-stained, half the letters of the neon sign gone or hanging by rusted bolts. The parking lot was cracked, puddles of stagnant rainwater reflecting the faded colors. "This is it," Eli whispered. Maya forced a smile. "This is it." The heavy front doors groaned when she pushed them open. A wave of stale air hit them. Dust, mildew, faint traces of grease and shoe polish lingering like ghosts. Inside, silence reigned. The once bright lanes stretched out in darkness, warped and splintered. Ceiling tiles sagged with water stains, and graffiti scrawled across the walls shouted names of kids, long grown. She flicked a switch. Nothing. The power was dead. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as she moved forward. Eli trailing close behind. Rows of rental shoes still lined the shelves behind the counter. Their leather cracked, laces tangled together like forgotten artifacts. A half-empty soda cup sat fossilized on a nearby table. Lid collapsed inward, straw brittle, on lane 7. A ball rested mid-approach, as if waiting decades for someone to throw it. Creepy, Eli muttered, his small hand gripping her sleeve. Maya's chest tightened. It wasn't what she had imagined. In her mind, it had been tired but repairable. Here it felt more like a mausoleum, an inheritance of ruin. Still, something stirred in her. Beneath the decay, echoes of laughter and Friday night tournaments whispered through the dust. Families had once gathered here. Lives had once intersected. Maybe, just maybe, they could again. Near the arcade corner, she crouched and picked up a yellowed piece of paper half buried under debris. She brushed the dust away and squinted at faded print. Scorecard. Millhaven Lanes League 1978. Names scrawled in pencil. Donnie, Carl, Evelyn, Roscoe. Beside each, numbers carefully tallied. She ran her finger down the page, imagining their cheers and jeers, the crack of pins. The scorecard crumbled at the edges in her hand, but it was proof of the life that once pulsed here. "Mom, look!" Eli pointed toward the counter. Maya followed his gaze. There, behind the register, the wood paneling was broken away just enough to reveal a metal door bolted into the wall. Its surface was dull, paint chipping, a heavy industrial lock hanging across the handle. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't expected this. Is that a vault? Eli whispered, eyes wide. Maya swallowed hard. She stepped closer, brushing her fingertips against the cold surface. It was sturdy, deliberate, not like the flimsy doors around it. Whatever had been left in this place, someone had wanted hidden. The bowling alley may have been abandoned, but in that locked door pulsed a secret, waiting in silence. The bowling alley groaned like a tired old beast as Maya pushed deeper inside. Every step stirred dust that glittered in faint beams of light, sneaking through holes in the roof. Somewhere above, rainwater dripped steadily into a rusted bucket, its metallic plink echoing across the empty lanes. Eli darted ahead, his sneakers squeaking faintly on warped wooden floors. "It's huge!" he shouted, his voice bouncing off the cavernous space. Maya winced. She saw peeling paint, sagging beams, gutters torn away. To her, it was overwhelming ruin, but to Eli, it was a playground. He skidded onto lane 3, pretending to bowl an invisible ball, collapsing in laughter when he slipped. "Careful," Maya called, her voice sharp. Her eyes lingered on the sagging roof above him. "This place isn't safe," Eli grinned, brushing dust off his jeans. "It could be. What if we fix it up? We could make it ours." His innocence both warmed and hurt her. She wanted to believe him. Instead, she pulled out a battered notebook from her purse, the one she used for grocery lists. She flipped to a clean page and began scribbling roof repair, power inspection, plumbing. The list grew too fast, her pen pressing deeper with each word until it nearly tore the paper. In the manager's office, cobwebs draped across broken blinds. A filing cabinet slouched in the corner, its drawers warped by years of damp. She tugged one open, the metal shrieking in protest. Inside, papers lay swollen and yellowed. She pulled out a stack, dust coating her fingers. The top page made her pause. Property appraisal, strike and save bowling. Millhaven County, 1981. Official letterhead. Crisp typewriter ink faded but legible. The numbers startled her, valued then at $850,000. She stared at the figure, shaking her head. How could something once worth nearly $1 million be left to rot, sold to her for $600? She tucked the papers under her arm like proof, like receipts of a strange bargain she had stumbled into. Meanwhile, Eli discovered the remnants of the arcade. Half a pinball machine leaning against the wall, buttons missing, wires exposed. He slapped at the flippers, making explosion sounds with his mouth. "See? It's still fun." Maya leaned against the counter, exhaustion creeping into her bones. All she saw was cost, dollars she didn't have, work she couldn't afford. Yet Eli's laughter rang through the silence, filling the hollow space with life it hadn't known in decades. For a fleeting second, she saw what he saw. Not ruin, but potential. A place where birthdays could be celebrated, where laughter could return. She exhaled slowly, brushing a layer of dust from the countertop. That's when she noticed it. Near the edge of the counter, just above the strange metal door she'd found earlier, the floorboards carried faint marks. Scratches in the wood, subtle but deliberate, like heavy objects had been dragged repeatedly. She crouched, running her fingers across the grooves. They weren't random. They circled the door's perimeter, as if someone had tried to wedge it open or pry it loose. Her chest tightened. Someone had fought to get through that door before. She straightened, the old appraisal papers trembling in her hands. What had been so important to hide that even decades of abandonment hadn't dulled the evidence of struggle? The bowling alley had secrets, and she had just inherited every one of them. The bowling alley lingered in her thoughts long after she and Eli returned home that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of their cramped apartment, unable to silence the questions that churned inside her. Who owned that metal door? Why had it been locked, scratched, almost fought over? By morning, her curiosity had hardened into determination. After dropping Eli at school, she drove to the Millhaven County Records office, a squat brick building smelling of old paper and dust. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles perched low on his nose, squinted when she explained. "Strike and Save. Haven't heard that name in years." He rifled through drawers, the sound of shuffling folders filling the silence. Finally, he slid a thick file across the counter. Inside were deeds and tax assessments. The last registered owner, Robert Vance, 1982. After that, nothing. No sale, no transfer. The paper trail ended abruptly. "Looks like it just stopped," Maya said quietly. The clerk shrugged. Plenty of businesses did back then. Times were tough. Factories closed. People skipped town, others... He lowered his voice. "Well, some got tangled with the wrong crowds." Maya raised her eyes. "What do you mean?" Millhaven was mob country in the 70s and 80s. Rumor was they laundered money through bowling alleys, bars, anything with cash flow. When the feds closed in, people disappeared. Sometimes, so did their assets. His words clung to her all the way back to the alley. That afternoon, she walked the lanes again, every creak of the floorboard feeding her paranoia. What if this place had been abandoned for reasons far darker than broken neon and leaky roofs? In the manager's office, she yanked open another drawer of the old filing cabinet. Beneath stacks of water-stained invoices, her fingers brushed something stiff and bound. She pulled it free, a leather ledger, cover cracked, pages yellowing with age. Inside, neat columns of initials and numbers filled every line. Week after week, thousands of dollars were marked with cryptic notations. JV 15K, RT 12.5. Cash drop 711. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a bowling league's record book. It was something else entirely. She flipped through faster, heart pounding. The sums grew larger, then abruptly stopped mid-page, the ink trailing off as if the writer had never returned. The last entry was dated July 1983, the same year Robert Vance vanished from county records. Maya set the ledger on the desk, staring at it as dust motes drifted lazily in the stale air. Her hands trembled. "Mom!" Eli's voice startled her. He had followed quietly, eyes wide. "What is it?" She forced a smile. "Just old papers. Nothing important." She slid the ledger back inside the drawer, but the weight of it pressed against her chest. As she turned to close the desk, her hand brushed the underside of the counter. Something small and metallic scraped her fingertip. Frowning, she crouched, reaching up into the dark recess. Her fingers closed around cold metal. She pulled it free, a small brass key, dulled by years, taped carefully with brittle yellowing adhesive. It was too deliberate, too hidden to be meaningless. Eli's eyes lit up. "Does it go to the vault?" Maya stared at the key, heart hammering. Maybe it did, and maybe someone had left it behind on purpose. The brass key sat in Maya's palm like it weighed 100 pounds. Small, ordinary, but thrumming with possibilities. She carried it everywhere for days, slipped into her purse at work, hidden beneath her pillow at night, always close, as if it held the power to transform everything. On the fourth evening, she and Eli returned to the bowling alley with a flashlight, a crowbar, and courage she wasn't sure she truly had. The storm clouds gathering over Millhaven seemed to lean low as if to watch. The inside air was colder this time, sharper, like the building itself was holding its breath. Dust swirled in her flashlight beam as they approached the counter. The locked metal door loomed, silent and heavy. Eli's whisper broke the quiet. "Do you think it fits?" Maya swallowed. Only one way to know. Her hand trembled as she slid the brass key into the lock. For a moment it resisted. Then, with a dull metallic click, it turned. The lock released. Eli gasped. Maya pushed, the hinges groaning like something waking from a 40-year sleep. The door scraped against the floor, opening slowly into darkness. Her flashlight cut through layers of dust and shadow. It wasn't a vault, but a hidden office. The air was stale, tinged with the sour smell of mold and old paper. A desk slumped in the corner, its wood swollen by damp. On the walls, shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten binders and cardboard boxes. Maya stepped inside, the floor creaking under her weight. Papers littered the ground, their edges curled, ink faded. She crouched and lifted one, a payroll sheet from 1981, names and wages typed neatly across it. She set it aside, her hands shaking. "Look, Mum," Eli said, pointing. In the far corner, bolted firmly to the floor, sat a steel safe. Its surface was mottled with rust, but the dial and handle gleamed faintly where time hadn't managed to eat through. Maya's pulse thundered. She approached slowly, brushing her hand across the cold metal. On the wall behind it, just above the molding, something caught her eye. She leaned closer, shining the flashlight. Numbers, faint, almost erased. But there, 3824, scrawled in pencil, barely visible, as though someone had tried to hide them in plain sight. Her throat went dry. "Is that the code?" Eli asked, his voice hushed. "Maybe," Maya whispered. Her fingers fumbled against the dial, turning it carefully. 3824. Each click echoed in the room like thunder. The final turn met resistance, and then, with a sharp metallic clunk, the safe gave way. The heavy door creaked open. Dust puffed into the air. Maya held her breath and pulled it wide. Inside, stacked neatly in rows, were coin rolls. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each wrapped in faded paper but still intact. The flashlight beam glinted off polished edges, shining silver untouched by time. Eli leaned closer, eyes wide. "Are those quarters?" Maya reached for one roll, unwrapping it carefully. The paper fell away, revealing a stack of coins so pristine they looked freshly minted. She turned one over in her palm. The eagle on its back gleamed under the light. Her chest tightened. "These aren't quarters," she whispered. "They're silver dollars." The realization rippled through her like lightning. These weren't pocket change. These were collectors' treasures, untouched for decades. Each one potentially worth hundreds, maybe thousands. And here they were, piled in a forgotten safe inside an abandoned bowling alley she had bought for $600. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the desk to steady herself, the reality too enormous to hold. Eli whispered, "So we're rich?" Maya shook her head, still staring at the glittering coins. "I don't know, but this is something big." She turned back to the safe, her flashlight sweeping deeper. More rolls stacked in neat bundles, stretching to the back wall. Some wrapped in red paper, others blue, each marked with years she recognized. 1922, 1935, 1945. Her breath came shallow. This wasn't someone's spare change jar. This was a collection, a hoard, a fortune. Behind her, the shelves groaned, and she startled, swinging the flashlight toward the noise. Boxes shifted, spilling old documents onto the floor. One folder slid open, revealing newspaper clippings, headlines about Millhaven's mysterious disappearances in the 1980s. Maya crouched, heart pounding, and picked up a clipping. The headline screamed, "Local businessman Robert Vance missing, investigation ongoing." She froze, the name from the county records. The last registered owner of Strike and Save, the man whose trail went cold in 1983. Her hand shook as she set the clipping down and turned back to the safe. The coins glimmered in the darkness, silent witnesses to secrets buried with time, and Maya knew, with certainty now, that she had stepped into a story far bigger and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The safe's yawning mouth seemed endless. Maya crouched lower, her flashlight beam quivering across the stacks. The coins weren't just a handful of rolls, there were hundreds, bundled tight, stacked with military precision, tucked into wooden crates that had survived the decades. The air in the hidden office felt thicker now, charged with something she couldn't name. Dust motes swirled like glitter, catching beams of light that sliced in through a cracked vent. The coins shimmered, their silver and gold surfaces reflecting like tiny suns. Her breath caught. She reached for another roll, peeling the fragile paper back. Inside, a neat column of gold coins. Each one bore the solemn face of Lady Liberty on one side, a soaring eagle on the other. The edges still sharp, the shine undimmed. Eli gasped. "They're gold." Maya's fingers trembled. She turned one over slowly. It was heavy, denser than anything she'd ever held. She whispered, almost to herself, "A St. Gordon's double eagle." The words had spilled from some half-remembered conversation in the diner when a customer once bragged about coin collecting. Her flashlight caught the dates etched onto the coins. 1923, 1931, 1942. Each year pulsed with history, Depression-era survivors, wartime relics, untouched treasures. Her mind reeled. These weren't coins for spending. They were artifacts. "Mom?" Eli's voice was hushed, reverent. "Is it a treasure?" Maya swallowed hard. "Yes, more than that." She reached deeper into the safe and pulled out a yellowing manila envelope. The flap had been tucked shut but not sealed. Her fingers slid it open. Inside was a folded sheet, brittle with age. She smoothed it across the desk, her flashlight illuminating faded typewriter ink. Appraisal report. Millhaven Collectibles Exchange. March suit 1982. Inventory 12,000 plus silver dollars. 3,000 plus gold eagles, rare commemoratives. Estimated value 6,000. Maya's knees weakened. 6 million. In 1982, her mind did the math without wanting to. That was 40 years ago. If 6 million, then what would these be worth now? She pressed a hand to her chest, struggling to breathe evenly. The world tilted around her. Bills, eviction notices, empty cupboards. Her entire existence had been shaped by scarcity. And here, hidden in dust and silence, was enough money to change not just her life, but Eli's life. Forever. Her flashlight beam swept again, revealing still more. Commemorative medallions sealed in plastic, proof sets in velvet-lined boxes, slabs marked with official grading stickers. Whoever Robert Vance had been, he hadn't been careless. This was a curated hoard, deliberate and immense. She reached for one slabbed coin, the plastic case cracked, but the coin inside pristine. A silver dollar gleamed, its luster undiminished by decades. The grading sticker still read MS-65 Gem UNC. She remembered hearing once at the diner, a coin like that could fetch thousands on its own. And here were crates full. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. "Mom," Eli whispered, "are we rich now?" Maya looked at him, his hair tousled, his sneakers splitting at the seams, his eyes lit with wonder. A sob rose in her throat. I don't know yet, but this..." She swept her hand across the glittering piles. "This is beyond anything I ever dreamed." Eli crouched beside her, picking up one coin with both hands, as if it might break. He held it up to the flashlight beam, his grin wide. "It's like a movie. Like pirates." She laughed shakily, though tears pricked her eyes. "Something like that." But beneath her awe, another emotion stirred. Fear. Why had this been left here? Why had no one come back for it? And what had happened to Robert Vance? The man whose name was etched on every record but vanished from history in 1983. The coins gleamed up at her like silent witnesses. Holding their secrets tight, she picked up the appraisal sheet again. Her eyes locked on the bold figure, $6,000. Her thumb brushed the date, 1982. She whispered the thought aloud, her voice trembling. If they were worth $6 million, then what are they worth now? The question hung in the stale air, heavier than any coin, and for the first time, Maya realized discovering this treasure might not only change her life, it might also paint a target on her back. The coins haunted her thoughts. At the diner, she found herself pouring coffee without realizing the cup was already full. At night, she woke in a cold sweat, convinced someone was knocking at the door. Treasure wasn't just wealth, it was weight. Dragging shadows out of hiding, she needed answers. Back in the county archives, Maya requested files on Robert Vance, the name stamped on every deed and receipt connected to the alley. The clerk hesitated before returning with a thin, dust-coated box. Inside were photocopied tax records, a half-completed loan application, and at the very bottom, a folded newspaper clipping. Maya pulled it free, her hands trembling. The headline stretched across yellowed newsprint in bold black letters. Local businessman found dead. Bowling alley, future in doubt. July 14th, 1983. Her eyes scanned the column. Robert Vance, age 48, had been discovered in his car near the river. The cause of death listed as undetermined. No foul play confirmed, but no explanation either. His surviving relatives were said to be estranged and unavailable for comment. Sly, sitting beside her, leaned over to read. He died the same year the records stopped. Maya nodded slowly, bile rising in her throat. And nobody claimed the property afterward. It just sat here. The article mentioned something else. A pending federal investigation into Vance's finances never concluded. The case had gone cold. The puzzle pieces slid together in her mind. A bowling alley abandoned mid-decade, ledgers of coded cash transactions, a hidden vault stuffed with coins, and an owner dead under mysterious circumstances. Her stomach tightened. If Vance had been hiding that fortune, who else had known? And who had silenced him? She folded the clipping carefully, slipping it into her notebook like evidence. Back at the alley, the silence pressed heavier than before. The discovery no longer felt like wonder. It was menace disguised as opportunity. She walked the lanes with Eli, every creak of the boards making her glance over her shoulder. In the manager's office, she spread the clipping beside the appraisal report and the ledger she had found earlier. The papers told a story more chilling than she wanted to believe. She whispered aloud, maybe he was killed for this. Eli's face paled. Mom, don't say that. But the thought burrowed deep, an unwelcome truth she couldn't shake. What if someone had already died for these coins? What if the danger wasn't buried with Robert Vance, but waiting for whoever stumbled next into his secret? As dusk fell, the building seemed to shrink around them. Maya began to pack the papers back into her bag, her fingers trembling. The bowling alley was no longer just theirs. It was someone else's unfinished story, and she had stepped into the middle of it. Then it came, a sharp, deliberate knock on the alley's front door. Both she and Eli froze. The sound echoed through the hollow lanes, too real to ignore. Not the groan of wind, not the scrape of branches. Someone was there. Maya's heart pounded. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling Eli to stay silent. The knock came again, firmer this time, as if the visitor knew exactly where she was. Someone else knew about Strike and Save, and they weren't leaving. The knock on the door had faded into silence, but it left a tremor inside Maya that wouldn't stop. Someone knew. Someone else wanted what she had uncovered. And the question that had begun as a whisper in her mind now roared louder each day. What should I do with it? The coins weren't just treasure. They were temptation. Each time she ran her fingers over their smooth, heavy surfaces, she saw a different life. Eli's shoes no longer falling apart. A real home, with windows that didn't leak and walls that didn't peel. College paid for. No more working double shifts, no more debt collectors, no more fear, but alongside that vision came dread. If she reported the hoard, it could all vanish into government vaults, claimed as unregistered assets or tied back to Robert Vance's shadowy past. She might be left with nothing but stories, and if she kept it secret, what then? She and Eli could disappear, vanish like Vance himself. But disappearances came with their own dangers. For 3 nights she wrestled with it, pacing their cramped apartment. Her notebook filled with columns of arguments, pros and cons, scribbled in messy handwriting. She scrolled through late-night forums about coin collecting, black market auctions, the law on found treasure. Each page deepened her unease. Finally, with shaking hands, she drafted an email. She attached photos of a few coins, careful to crop out the surroundings. The subject line was plain: appraisal inquiry. The reply came within hours. A professional numismatics firm in New York had responded. Her stomach flipped as she read the words aloud to herself. Dear Ms. Albright, based on the images provided, these coins appear authentic and in exceptional condition. At modern market rates, such a collection could easily reach an estimated auction value of $120,000. The number glared back at her. 120 million. She dropped the phone onto the bed, her chest heaving. She thought of the $600 cashier's check she had scraped together to buy the alley. How could the universe flip a life so violently, so quickly? Mom, Eli's voice came from the doorway, soft and uncertain. Why are you crying? She wiped her face, trying to steady her voice. It's nothing, sweetheart, but it was everything. Later that night, another email pinged her phone. This one less official, less polished. It came from a private buyer. How they had found her address, she didn't know. The tone was smooth but insistent. I understand you may have stumbled onto certain assets once belonging to the Vance estate. Let me be clear, others are searching for them as well. Discretion will protect you. Contact me immediately if you wish to discuss a private sale. Otherwise, time is not on your side. Maya's hands shook as she read it. She glanced at Eli, asleep on the couch with a blanket pulled to his chin. Her child's future rested in her choices now, and every option carried danger. Should she go public, risking it all in the name of truth, or take the private path, securing safety but stepping into shadows? The coins were no longer silent. They had voices, whispering promises of freedom and threats of ruin. Maya knew, with bone-deep certainty, she could not keep them hidden much longer. The next morning, Maya found it. An envelope lay on the apartment floor, slid neatly under the door while she and Eli had slept. Her heart pounded as she bent to pick it up. No return address, no postage, just her name, written in blocky, uneven letters. She tore it open. Inside, one line scrawled across lined paper in black ink. You're sitting on my family's legacy. Return it or else. The words burned into her vision. Her hands shook. She pressed the note flat on the kitchen table, staring as though the letters might rearrange themselves into something less menacing. Eli padded in, rubbing his eyes. What's that? Nothing, she said too quickly, crumpling the page. She shoved it into her purse, her chest tight. But the truth pressed against her ribs. Someone knew. Someone was watching. At the diner later, every face in the booth seemed sharper, every laugh suspicious. A man in the corner with a newspaper lingered too long. A customer's eyes darted to her purse when she passed. She couldn't tell if it was paranoia or reality, but either way, fear crawled under her skin. That night, back at the alley, she tried to steady herself. The safe still loomed open, the coins untouched since her discovery. She should have felt relief, but instead the sight made her heart race with panic. They weren't just treasure anymore, they were a beacon. As she sorted through the old documents, Eli explored, weaving between warped lanes and broken furniture. She called out for him every few minutes, her voice tinged with unease. Suddenly, his voice echoed from the arcade corner. "Mom?" Her flashlight beam swung toward him. He stood frozen, his small frame tense. "I saw someone," he whispered. Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "It was a man. Over there, near the door. He was watching me." Maya's chest constricted. She rushed to him, pulling him close, her eyes scanning the shadowed doorway. Empty. The night wind moaned through the cracks, stirring debris. But Eli's trembling hand pointed directly at the entrance. Her mind raced. Could it have been the same person who left the note? Or just a trick of shadows? She tried to steady her voice. Maybe it was nothing, but Eli shook his head violently. No, Mom, he was there. I swear! The fear in his voice silenced her denial. She squeezed his hand tight, ushering him back toward the office. On the desk lay the ledger, the appraisal sheet, the threatening note she had stuffed into her purse. She spread them out, the evidence of a dangerous inheritance. Her anger flared through the fear. Someone believed they had a claim. But where had they been for 40 years? Where were they when this place fell apart, when its secrets gathered dust? She slammed the safe shut, the metal clang reverberating through the hollow building. They're not taking this from us, she muttered under her breath. Still, her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She tucked Eli behind her, her body instinctively shielding him from the empty doorway. The shadows seemed thicker, the silence heavier. As they prepared to leave, Eli clutched her arm, whispering again. His voice cracked, breaking something inside her. Mom, what if he comes back? Her heart pounded. She forced calm into her tone, even as fear gnawed at her. Then we'll be ready. But the truth she couldn't admit aloud echoed inside her head. Someone out there believed the treasure belonged to them, and they weren't going to stop until they got it. The threatening note stayed in Maya's purse, its edges crumpled from how many times she had unfolded it, reread it, and stuffed it back. For days, fear ruled every step, checking locks twice, glancing over her shoulder when she walked Eli home from school, jumping at the sound of footsteps behind her. But fear could not last forever. Something hardened inside her. The coins weren't just some shadowy inheritance. They had fallen into her hands because no one else had claimed them. They had been forgotten by the world, sealed away in silence. And now someone wanted to scare her back into poverty, into invisibility. She refused. At the kitchen table one night, she spread everything out, the ledger, the appraisal sheet from 1982, the modern email valuing the collection at $120 million, the threatening note, and the clipping about Robert Vance's mysterious death. She stared at the messy collage of paper and history. This is bigger than us, she whispered. So we'll face it bigger. The next morning, she made the hardest call of her life. Not to the diner to request extra shifts, not to the utility company begging for extensions, but to a lawyer. She described what she had found, her voice shaking but steadying with every word. There was silence on the line before the lawyer replied, "You'll need protection, Mrs. Albright, but if everything you're saying is true, you may not just own the property. You may own what's inside of it." Her pulse quickened. "So it's legal?" "Not without a fight," he said. "But that's what we do." Within a week, she sat across a heavy oak desk in a law office that smelled of leather and dust. The lawyer slid a manila folder across to her. The cover was stamped in red. Case opened. Maya touched the folder, the bold letters searing into her vision. This wasn't secrecy anymore. This was war, and she was fighting it openly. Over the next few days, everything changed. She catalogued every roll of coins, every appraisal, every scrap of evidence. Photos filled her phone. Rows of mint-condition silver dollars, gleaming gold eagles, commemorative medallions. The lawyer's office made copies, filing motions to secure her rights as the legal property owner. Whispers spread. What had begun as silence now hummed through Millhaven. A single mum had stumbled upon something buried in the ruins of the Strike and Save. Some scoffed, others envied, but no one ignored it. Eli watched her with a mixture of awe and worry. "Mum, are we safe?" She looked at him, her heart swelling with equal parts fear and determination. "Not yet, but we will be." Each night she returned to the alley not with trembling hands, but with purpose. She documented, secured, prepared. The building that had once been only rot and ruin now felt like a fortress of history and her battlefield. Then the letter arrived. Official stationery, crisp and deliberate. The collection of coins found within the property known as Strike and Save Bowling has been scheduled for public auction. Date October 12th. Location New York Numismatics Exchange. Expected valuation, 120,000 plus. Maya read it 3 times, her breath caught between terror and exhilaration. This was no longer hidden. This was no longer rumor. The world was about to know. She folded the letter carefully, her hands steady this time, not trembling. The fight had begun, and for the first time in her life, Maya felt ready. The auction hall in New York buzzed like a hive. Reporters crowded the entrance, their cameras flashing as Maya and Eli stepped inside, flanked by her lawyer. The room shimmered with chandeliers, velvet drapes, and polished wood, a world so far from the cracked linoleum and peeling paint of Millhaven. Every step felt unreal. Only months ago, she had been scrubbing plates at the diner, begging the electric company for one more extension. Now she was here to watch the coins, the ones that had haunted and saved her, go under the hammer. The crates had been catalogued, authenticated, and displayed in glass cases. Collectors in tailored suits and glittering jewelry leaned in with greedy eyes. The air smelled faintly of polish and perfume, but beneath it, Maya swore she could sense the metallic tang of history itself. When the auctioneer raised his gavel, the room stilled. His voice rang out, confident and theatrical. Lot 1, 10 rolls of 1922 silver dollars, near mint condition. Opening bid, $100,000. The bids shot up instantly. A hand raised, another counted, numbers climbing higher than Maya thought possible. By the time the gavel struck, the coins had sold for nearly $500,000. The next lot, a case of St. Gordon's double eagles, soared even higher. 1 million, 1.5, 2 million. The audience gasped as the numbers climbed. Eli squeezed her hand, his eyes wide with awe. Lot after lot the fortune grew. Maya sat silent, her heart racing, each slam of the gavel echoing like a drumbeat of vindication. Midway through, a disturbance rippled across the room. A man stood, his voice sharp. "Objection! These coins belong to Robert Vance. He was my uncle." Gasps filled the hall. Reporters scribbled furiously. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow, waiting as the lawyer stepped forward. Calmly he unfolded a packet of documents, stamped and sealed. The property was legally abandoned, the lawyer stated. The deed transferred to Ms. Albright. Any claims to inheritance expired decades ago. The judge overseeing the auction nodded, unimpressed by the man's bluster. "Sit down. Unless you have proof, you have no claim." The supposed heir shrank back, his words collapsing under scrutiny. The auction rolled forward. By evening, the tally exceeded anything Maya had imagined. The coins fetched staggering sums, tens of millions, then crossing into 9 figures. The final gavel struck, the hall erupting in applause and astonishment. The next morning's headlines splashed across every paper. "Single mom nets $120 in rare coin auction." The photo beneath showed Maya standing beside her lawyer. The auctioneer's gavel frozen mid-strike. Eli's grin shone brightest of all, his small frame wrapped in her arms. For the first time in years, Maya felt the weight of survival lift from her shoulders. Justice had triumphed. The secrets of strike and save had been dragged into the light, and instead of ruin, they had brought her vindication. But as the cameras flashed and the microphones crowded close, she knew the story wasn't ending here. The world now wondered, what would a single mother, once mocked for daring to buy an abandoned bowling alley, do with $120 million? The answer, Maya thought with a quiet smile, would shock them all. Months later, the strike and save bowling alley no longer stood in silence. The sagging roof had been replaced. Neon lights, once broken, now glowed bright again, their colors splashing across the night sky. Families crowded the freshly paved parking lot, children tugging their parents by the hand, eager to see what everyone in Millhaven whispered about. Inside, the smell of fresh paint mingled with popcorn and polished wood. The warped lanes had been torn out and rebuilt, sleek and shining, beneath buzzing overhead lights. The hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by bursts of laughter, the crash of pins, and music that played softly over speakers. Maya stood near the entrance, scissors in hand, Eli at her side. He looked older now, taller somehow, though it had only been months. She tightened her grip on his hand, her heart swelling. Cameras flashed as the crowd gathered closer. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Eli grinned. "I've been ready." Together, they cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers, applause echoing through the building like the sound of pins falling in perfect strike. A photographer snapped the moment, later capturing it in a frame that would hang just inside the front doors. Maya and Eli, smiling beneath the glowing sign, scissors raised, ribbon falling. But the bowling alley was more than recreation now. It had become something else, a community center. The first floor housed not just lanes, but classrooms, where single parents could take financial literacy workshops. A play area had been built for children, funded entirely by the fortune discovered in that hidden vault. Upstairs, a quiet room offered tutoring programs, staffed by volunteers. The same space once filled with shadows and secrets, now pulsed with life. Reporters asked why she had chosen to pour so much back into Millhaven instead of vanishing with her millions. Maya's answer was always the same: "Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten. I don't want anyone else here to feel that way." Word spread beyond the town. Donations poured in, grants multiplied, and soon Millhaven, once a name synonymous with decay, became a story of rebirth. The bowling alley stood at its heart, a symbol of what could grow from ruin. Late one evening, after the crowds had left and the alley was quiet again, Maya walked the lanes alone. She paused at lane 7, the same spot where a dusty ball had once rested mid-approach on her first day inside. Now the wood gleamed under the lights, polished and perfect. Eli ran up beside her, clutching a ball almost too big for his hands. "Come on, Mom, let's play one." She laughed, ruffling his hair. "You'll beat me." "Maybe," he said, his grin wide, "but that's the fun part." They set up a single game. The ball rolled down, pins scattered, and laughter filled the space. The sound echoed through the building, not hollow this time, but alive. Above the counter, framed next to the ribbon-cutting photo, hung the deed to the property, the crumpled classified ad, and the yellowed appraisal from 1982. Receipts of a story no one in Millhaven would forget. Sometimes, Maya thought as she watched Eli's face glow under the neon lights, the past hides gifts not meant to be buried forever. And sometimes, forgotten places hold futures we never dared to imagine.